one is those scenarios that I think you alluded to, Stefan, is that there's scenarios where you just don't know what you're going to get. You put it out there and you don't know how the reaction is going to be. I think for me, one of the big ways in the very beginning of a test is actually in recruiting, right? So there's all this market research the company has done to try to figure out, okay, who is our customer? What do they look like? You make these user profiles and you think about why they like your product, why they would like your product, and you do all this research. And then oftentimes when you get to this testing stage and you're recruiting for your first test of that product, that's when you really find out, okay, who really is interested in this, right? And there's definitely been times where, a company that I'm working with is adamant sort of that, no, we have this customer, we want you to find 250 people that look like this person, right? And I always push back against that, and sometimes I win, sometimes I lose. But what ends up happening is that you go after that customer, and sometimes they're not as interested as you thought they were. It doesn't necessarily meet their needs. It wasn't actually that exciting for them. And that's been some of the more impactful things in the past, is that you get to that recruiting stage and you realize, wait a minute, there's actually this other group of people that are like way more engaged, way more interested in what you're doing, have these ideas for how to use the product and what it should be to them. And that's been, usually the first impactful part of any testing program I've done has actually been this really early stage sort of market validation and being able to kind of go back to the marketing team and the executive team and say, hey, wait a minute, we're seeing something strange here. We should be maybe thinking about who we're marketing this to. And that happened, at Noon was a smart lighting company. We built this system and really meant for it to be more sort of DIY installation and something. And, we had testers that were totally comfortable doing that and were able to, it's a high voltage wiring for your lighting, but they were comfortable doing it. But that doesn't mean they were all comfortable, even if they were very tech savvy and they were sort of like what other products would consider very much so early adopters. There was something about that electricity that definitely put some people off. And so, the company actually ended up making a pivot to a B2B style sales method. And then all of a sudden, the website, the marketing, who are actual customers that we're marketing this to became sort of these installers and these different shops that would be doing these things instead, right? And so it just sort of completely changed how the company was operating. And so it's stuff like that I think is super impactful. And you can make all these educated guesses. I think the cool thing for me and why I love working on this stuff is it's reality. It's the first time that you actually get out there and you're in front of real life, real people, and sometimes they just love it and they run with it, and other times they just go meh, and you kind of have to try to figure that out and adjust. And I think that those have been the times where it's really impacted things.
That's super interesting. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I come from market research, like one of my backgrounds in research itself. But what you're explaining is like product market fit, right? So you do research to establish like these user problems, and then you get a makeup of what they would look like, and then you align your product and your solutions to those problems. And you're saying, okay, there's the product market fit, and you could establish this months, maybe even further, like a year in advance of that. And it's kind of hard pressed that, your market's not going to change in that time frame, right? So while you're building it, you kind of need to keep up on that research and refresh that data. And there's a point where you actually develop your product and it's ready, and you get to actually validate that product market fit. And that's huge, right? It's before it's going out, because you don't know exactly. Like everything is kind of an assumption. You're doing interviews and surveys, and like, yeah, they have these problems, and yeah, they'd be interested in our solution, and we're totally going to nail this. And then we do some, prototypes, and like, yeah, cool. But once it gets in their home or in their office and they start using it, that's when you get a sense of, what are they liking? What are they not liking? And does this actually solve that problem? Is there some other solution that's solving it? And it's just interesting. And I think that longevity of testing is important, that you're not entering product development saying, okay, we're going to do one beta or one field test and that's it. It's like this idea of you're going to be reaching out to customers throughout, like during this whole cycle. You don't want to have gaps.